I almost lost my sleep this past few days. All of us, well, we were not fooled because we were following. But every time that we talked about it, and we said that this was a monumental scam, and there was never any war on terror. It was a war of terror against a fabricated enemy. And Al-Qaeda was a joke, was an invention, was totally fake. Obviously, we were cut off. All of us who did that. Well, I never stopped doing it, and now we have the graphic confirmation that everything that we were saying for over 20 years was true. This moment hits hard. For years, anyone who questioned the war on terror was dismissed, laughed at, silenced. But now, the confirmations are out, and everything they called conspiracy is turning out to be closer to the truth. What he's saying is simple. The enemy was manufactured. The fear was scripted, and the world paid the price for a story that never matched reality. And here's the real shock. The people who warned us weren't wrong. They were early. You have the former Emir of ISIS in Idlib, former Al-Qaeda in Syria, #1 operative, former head shopper, former killer, received in the White House as a tough guy. "I like him," said the President of the United States, and giving his marching orders of what he has to do in Syria to facilitate the expansion of the Zionist entity. So this is the only thing you need to completely destroy the whole fabrication of the war on terror. Ever since Dick Cheney proclaimed it on September 11th itself, it was Dick Cheney that proclaimed the war on terror was not dubia. This was a Dick Cheney invention. This was a neocon invention. And this was a neocon invention based on the discussions of neocons with, what else? The death cult in West Asia. This clip blows the narrative apart. If the so-called war on terror was real, I've barely slept these past few days, not because the truth is new, but because the confirmation is finally here. For over 20 years, anyone who questioned the so-called war on terror was mocked, silenced, censored, or labeled a conspiracy theorist. But now the evidence is out, and it's undeniable. The truth is simple. For years, analysts, journalists, and researchers who pointed out that Al-Qaeda was a Western creation were dismissed. But now we have visual proof backing everything that was said for decades. One of the most shocking examples: a former ISIS emir, a former Al-Qaeda commander, the same man once portrayed as a global threat, was welcomed inside the White House. The U.S. president even praised him and gave him directives for operations in Syria. That single contradiction destroys the entire narrative of the war on terror. Since day one, the war wasn't against terrorism. It was a war of terror, designed and funded, rebranded, and recycled whenever convenient. The deaths, the trillions of dollars, the destroyed countries, all dismissed as collateral. Meanwhile, the Pentagon office that was supposed to audit $2.3 trillion conveniently got hit on 9/11. Coincidence? Hard to believe. For decades, Al-Qaeda win Iraq. Everyone on the ground already knew that Al-Qaeda in Iraq was engineered at Camp Bucca, where radical jihadists and former Saddam officers were placed together by the U.S., forming what eventually became ISIS. These groups didn't rise naturally. They were constructed. And yet the governments acted shocked, pretending these Frankenstein creations were spontaneous extremists threatening the world. Wasn't an external enemy. It was an asset. The pattern repeats: covert operations, sanctions to weaken states, terror groups used as tools, countries destabilized from Syria to Mali to Central Asia. It's the same playbook. Today, the empire is cornered. Economies collapsing, populations angry, global influence shrinking. In Central Asia, countries like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan play along publicly with the U.S., but their real alliances remain with Russia for security and China for economics. Kazakhstan is the main battleground. Multi-vector diplomacy keeps it balanced. Only shadows melting into darkness. But Washington still pushes aggressively, just like Cheney did years ago, trying to secure energy control and military footholds. Yet history shows these efforts always fail because China and Russia already dominate the region. And now Trump suddenly cares about Central Asia, not because of diplomacy, but because he wants to return to Afghanistan and regain military presence. But SCO members have made it clear: no foreign bases, ever destabilization. But Central Asia knows the playbook. Kazakhstan, especially, is heavily protected by Russia, and its internal clan politics make it too complex to manipulate easily. In the end, the message is this: the war on terror wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy built on lies, engineered enemies, and endless manipulation. And now the evidence proving all of this is finally out.